I love the Psalms. I love them because of their honesty. Psalms are not just songs of praise and thanksgiving, but there are psalms of hope and psalms of lamenting anger. They are reality set to music. They provide an outlet for the psalmist and the hearers to express themselves, to turn to God in all of their feelings and begin the healing process of writing and singing to the Lord. Music does that. It is why we love our hymns and why during this time of separation, we so desperately miss communal singing. Music soothes, it heals, it helps us process. And I think it is why it is this psalm that caught my attention. I'll admit, though, it wasn't so much the content of the psalm as one word in it. A phrase at the end of the stanza, Selah. The word Selah means to pause or reflect. The word can be found throughout many psalms, not just this one. And scholars aren't exactly sure how the word was used, if it was sung or spoken at the end of a reading, kind of like we use the word amen, or if it was just there to remind the reader to have a moment of silence. In this particular psalm, the placement of Selah reminds the singers, the readers, the hearers to consider the words that were just read. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and all who dwell therein. For it is God who founded it upon the seas and made it firm upon the rivers of the deep. Selah. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Selah. It is this Selah that struck me. And it likely struck me because I am always rushing to get to the next thing. It is difficult for me to pause, and y'all know me too well to know that I often speak too soon before I reflect. I am always trying to stick to the schedule that I have created for myself. But in light of everything else going on, I also find myself rushing to get through the discomfort of anything. And this is not irrational, but there are some things in life that we are just unable to rush, like grief or birthing pains or those awkward teenage years, or that light at Belvedere and Broad where the red light is way too long and the green arrow is way too short. But most recently, there have been other situations that I wish we could just jump to the end. The first of this is the discomfort of having to keep on keeping on with COVID. The continuation of needing to stay in our homes and continue to wear our masks and not being able to travel or plan. The concern of what the future holds for our schools and economy, our work, and our own spiritual well-being. We just want to get through it. We want it to be over. We want to get to the end. The other situation where I just want to jump to the end is the work that we must do around racism. This new awareness of racism in our country. The work of unwrapping ourselves, our country, and our system is hard work, and it's uncomfortable work because it means being willing to make mistakes and learning something new. And ultimately, I just want to rush through it and get to the end and have us all get along and be anti-racist. There's also a tendency to disengage, to pretend something like COVID or racism doesn't exist. A see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil scenario. But just because we don't see it or don't want to see it doesn't mean that it is not there. And to top it off, we can't rush it and we can't escape it. There are some things that we just cannot rush through. But instead, we are offered a third option, a holy pause, a Selah, that reminds us to surrender and to sit with difficult things. It's an invitation to take a deep breath and to listen. It's a holy musical rest, and it can be deeply uncomfortable. In 1952, the composer John Cage composed a piece called 433. The musical score instructs the performer or performers not to play their musical instruments during the entire duration of the piece for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And while it is commonly perceived as 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, the idea is that the listeners hear the music around them. Cage believed that anything could be considered music, including the ambient noise and the whispers and the movement of the audience. It was deeply uncomfortable as that first audience thought something was wrong. And then they felt deceived because they didn't get to hear a piece of music. Cage is quoted as saying after that first premiere, they missed the point. What they thought was silence because they didn't know how to listen was full of accidental sounds. You could hear the wind stirring outside during the first movement, and during the second movement, raindrops began pattering on the roof. And during the third, the people themselves made all kinds of interesting sounds as they talked and walked out. I am curious how many of us, when we are deeply uncomfortable, move too quickly to walk out. And sometimes that is the best thing to do if our safety is in jeopardy. But if it's not, I know that uncomfortable conversations and discomfort in being challenged and uncomfortable because of something being new to us or different than what we are used to, it is easy for us to leave or move away or separate ourselves or just pray that we can quickly get through it. But what if we chose to participate in a holy pause, in a Selah, in a holy musical rest? What accidental sounds might we hear? Do we know how to pause? Do we know how to listen? And if we know how, are we willing? I pray that each one of us will be present, taking time to pause and reflect in times when we may not want to, but when it is most needed. I pray that we would all create more moments of Selah, that each one of us could take more time to spend with God and reflecting on how the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. In these times when we can't escape or rush, or we courageously choose not to, what are we being called to pay attention to? I pray that we can hear and see and experience how the Spirit of God is woven in these holy pauses. Selah.